There comes a moment, quiet, powerful, and undeniable, when something within begins to soften, not from weakness, but from a strength so ancient it no longer needs to fight. This is the silent rise of the divine feminine, not as rebellion, but as return. In a world intoxicated by control, speed, and disconnection, the feminine doesn't scream, she surrenders, and in that sacred surrender, the universe listens. It realigns, reorders, and begins to heal what has long been torn. Love, which once felt like longing or illusion, becomes substance again, rooted in presence, balance, and truth. This is not just myth or mysticism. It is a deep psychological reality, and as Carl Jung illuminated, it lives in all of us, waiting for integration. If you feel this inner call toward balance and love, leave a comment below saying, "I welcome the return of sacred balance." Carl Jung understood the psyche not as a fixed identity, but as a living system composed of opposing forces seeking balance. Among his most powerful insights was the necessity of integrating the anima and animus, the inner feminine within men and the inner masculine within women. But beyond gender, these archetypes represent universal principles of receptivity and action, intuition and logic, surrender and will. The divine feminine, in Jungian terms, is not merely softness. It is the unconscious wisdom that allows for depth, for mystery, for being rather than only doing. When this feminine is repressed within individuals or cultures, it results in disconnection, domination, and the distortion of love into control. But when the divine feminine surrenders, not in defeat, but in conscious trust, she activates one of Jung's most profound processes, individuation. This is the path towards psychic wholeness, where the self integrates its opposites and becomes complete. Surrender in this context is not passivity. It is a courageous opening to the unconscious, to shadow, to emotion, to intuition. It is the descent into the unknown parts of the soul where transformation begins. And in this sacred descent, the masculine principle is no longer a tyrant. It becomes a container, a presence, a force that supports love rather than distorts it. Jung taught that true love is born not in projection, but in integration. When the feminine surrenders, she ceases to project the masculine outside of herself and begins to meet him within. This balance restores love to its rightful place, not as fantasy, but as a dynamic between integrated selves. There is a deep misunderstanding in the collective psyche when it comes to the concept of surrender. In a world that glorifies control, achievement, and dominance, surrender is often equated with defeat, submission, or passivity. But in the language of the soul and through the lens of Jungian psychology, surrender is not collapse. It is a conscious act of trust, a psychological and spiritual movement toward alignment with the deeper self. For the divine feminine archetype, surrender is not the loss of power, it is the activation of it in its most essential form. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious is not merely a repository of forgotten memories or instincts, but a living, intelligent dimension of the psyche that seeks integration with the conscious ego. The feminine principle, archetypally speaking, is the aspect of the psyche that holds space for this descent. It is receptive, intuitive, and cyclical. When the divine feminine surrenders, she opens the door to the unconscious, not blindly, but with reverent awareness. This is not about giving up, but about tuning in. It is a yielding that allows a deeper truth to emerge, one that is not dictated by the ego's agenda, but by the wholeness of the self. Surrender, in this light, becomes the first act of individuation. It is the turning inward, the relinquishing of rigid identity, and the quieting of the external noise so the voice of the inner world can rise. This is especially powerful in those who carry the feminine essence, as they are often conditioned to prioritize others' needs and suppress their own inner guidance. But true surrender doesn't come from being broken down. It arises when the feminine chooses, with consciousness, to release what no longer serves her evolution. Jung noted that what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. This applies profoundly to the feminine when she is in a state of contraction, resisting her own wisdom, doubting her intuition, fearing the vulnerability that surrender demands. But once she begins to trust the movement of her own psyche, she can allow the old structures, mental, emotional, or relational, to dissolve. and in their place, something more authentic emerges. This process does not follow a linear path. It unfolds in rhythms, dreams, and symbols. The feminine does not demand answers. She listens for meaning. In surrendering, she reclaims her power not through domination, but through presence. Her strength lies in being, in witnessing, in holding. This is the opposite of passive resignation. It requires radical courage to stay present to what is arising, especially when the instinct is to control or escape. The feminine surrenders not because she has no choice, but because she finally recognizes that her true power was never in the striving. It was always in the allowing. This act of conscious surrender also invites the masculine principle to evolve. In a balanced psyche, the feminine's surrender becomes the container through which the healthy masculine can rise, not as oppressor, but as protector and guide. Without the feminine's surrender, the masculine remains disconnected, lost in endless doing without being, action without reflection. But when the feminine trusts enough to let go, the unconscious has space to communicate with the conscious mind, and the two can begin to dance. This is where transformation takes root. The sacred power of surrender is the gateway to the restoration of balance. It is the movement that allows the inner and outer worlds to realign, so that love is no longer a projection or a longing. It becomes an embodied experience. The feminine teaches us that not everything must be forced into clarity. Some truths are revealed only when we are still enough to receive them. In this space of conscious yielding, the universe does not abandon her. It meets her. It responds not through control, but through synchronicity, through signs, through healing. And what returns is not chaos but order, a higher, more soulful order that could never be orchestrated by ego alone. To understand the fragmentation of love in today's world, we must begin with what has been buried. The repression of the divine feminine within the individual and within the collective is not just a philosophical idea. It is a psychological wound that manifests in the very fabric of modern relationships. Love, once rooted in sacred reciprocity and soul recognition, has increasingly become transactional, conditional, and performative. Behind this disintegration lies a deep imbalance, the silencing of the feminine voice and the exile of her sacred wisdom. Carl Jung emphasized that when any archetype is denied or repressed, it doesn't disappear. It descends into the unconscious, gaining force in the shadows. The feminine, when cast aside, becomes distorted. She shows up not as intuition, compassion, or inner knowing, but as insecurity, dependency, emotional chaos, or numbness. In relationships, this repression creates a polarity where one partner dominates and the other submits, or both become locked in roles that lack authenticity and depth. Instead of true connection, what emerges is a performance of love, something that looks right on the surface but is hollow within. The root of this crisis lies in the collective glorification of the masculine principle, defined here not as male, but as the archetype of action, logic, dominance, and control. These qualities are valuable, but when unbalanced by the feminine, they become destructive. When a culture worships productivity over presence, certainty over mystery, power over empathy, it breeds disconnection. The feminine, which holds the realm of emotion, intuition, and relational depth, is dismissed as irrational, weak, or inconvenient. And so, love becomes mechanical, deprived of soul. This collective imbalance does not remain external. It is internalized by individuals from an early age. Jung's concept of the persona, the mask we wear to fit into society, further reinforces the suppression of the true self, particularly the aspects associated with the feminine. Women are taught to be desirable rather than whole, to be agreeable rather than authentic. Men are conditioned to avoid vulnerability, to fear their own emotions, to dominate rather than connect. These distortions lead to romantic relationships built on projection rather than presence. Jung warned of projection as one of the most dangerous psychological mechanisms in love. When the inner feminine or masculine is unintegrated, we seek it outside of ourselves, expecting another to embody what we've abandoned within. The result is disillusionment, codependency, and cycles of abandonment and betrayal. We don't fall in love with the other. We fall in love with our own unmet needs and archetypes projected onto them. And when they fail to carry what we have refused to claim, we feel deceived. The repression of the feminine also shows up in our fear of depth. True love requires us to descend, to feel fully, to be vulnerable, to sit in the unknown. These are all feminine qualities that have been framed as dangerous or weak. Instead, we chase superficial connection, mistaking intensity for intimacy, control for commitment. But without the feminine, love cannot root. It remains a fantasy, a fleeting emotional high, easily discarded when discomfort arises. However, the crisis is also an opportunity. Jung believed that the psyche is self-regulating, that what is repressed will eventually rise, seeking healing and integration. The increasing breakdown of traditional relationship models is not just collapse, it is a calling. It is the soul's way of demanding that we return to balance, that we retrieve the lost feminine, and that we learn to love from the self rather than from the wound. The feminine is rising, not to dominate, but to be restored. Her return is marked by a desire for depth, for presence, for relational truth. And this return begins not by demanding it from the world, but by reclaiming her internally. When the individual begins to honor emotion, intuition, rest, and presence as sacred rather than secondary, the external world shifts. Love becomes less about filling a void and more about sharing fullness. Only by acknowledging the cost of her repression can we begin to heal the crisis of modern love. The journey back to sacred union starts with the reawakening of the feminine, not as an idea, but as a living force within. The return of the divine feminine cannot be complete without the conscious integration of her counterpart, the inner masculine. In Jungian psychology, every person holds both masculine and feminine principles within the psyche, represented archetypally by the animus and anima. While the feminine governs receptivity, intuition, and being, the masculine embodies direction, structure, and conscious will. When these two forces are split or imbalanced within the self, the soul remains divided, love remains distorted, and life becomes a search for completion in others, rather than a discovery of wholeness within. Carl Jung's process of individuation, a central theme in his work, requires the confrontation and integration of these inner opposites. The inner masculine, when unconscious or rejected, becomes rigid, controlling, or hyper-intellectual. In women, this can show up as an internalized voice that demands perfection, suppresses vulnerability, or prioritizes external success over inner truth. In men, a wounded masculine often masks itself as aggression, over-identification with action, or fear of stillness. In both, the disconnection from the true masculine leads to an inability to create healthy internal boundaries and sustain a grounded sense of self. Integration begins by recognizing that the inner masculine is not an enemy to the feminine, but her necessary partner in psychic balance. The feminine may carry the vision, the feeling, the intuitive knowing, but it is the integrated masculine that builds the structure to support her wisdom. He protects the inner life, brings clarity to emotion, and allows the soul's longing to take form in the world. Without him, the feminine remains fluid but ungrounded. With him, she becomes embodied and empowered. This union does not come through intellectual understanding alone. It is a lived experience that often begins in crisis. Many are called to integrate the inner masculine when the outer world collapses, when relationships fail, careers feel empty, or identities dissolve. In these moments, the ego can no longer sustain the illusion of control, and the unconscious begins to speak more loudly. It is here that the feminine, having surrendered, calls forth the healthy masculine, not to dominate, but to support the transformation unfolding. Jung noted that every woman's journey toward individuation involves encountering her animus, not as a tyrant, but as a guide. The immature animus may appear first, critical, argumentative, or cold. But as inner work deepens, he evolves. He becomes a voice of wisdom, discernment, and protection. He is the energy that says no when the old patterns try to return. He holds the sacred boundaries that allow the feminine to remain soft without collapsing. He acts not out of fear, but from clarity. Likewise, the integration of the masculine in men involves reconnecting with feeling, vulnerability, and empathy, the very qualities that the feminine awakens in him. This does not make him weak, it makes him whole. He becomes capable of holding space without fixing, of being present without overpowering. This is the mature masculine, rooted, conscious, and aligned with purpose that serves the soul rather than the ego. As this integration unfolds within the individual, it also transforms how love is experienced. No longer does one search for someone else to complete the missing half. Instead, relationships become a space where two whole beings meet, not to rescue or fill voids, but to co-create, to witness, to grow. This is sacred union, not born from fantasy, but forged through inner alchemy. When the feminine and masculine are in balance internally, there is a felt sense of coherence. Emotion and thought are not at war. Vision and action work together. Vulnerability is not a threat, and boundaries are not walls. The psyche functions as a unified field, where love is not something to chase, but something that naturally arises. In this space, the universe responds. It no longer reflects the chaos of the fragmented self, but the order of the integrated one. The inner masculine does not replace the need for love. He makes real love possible. He brings containment to the flow, presence to the mystery, and devotion to the sacred. He creates the conditions in which the feminine can rest, rise, and radiate, knowing she is safe, seen, and supported. In this union, wholeness is not just an idea. It becomes the lived foundation of a life rooted in truth. Love, in its truest form, is not something we find. It is something we remember, something we return to once we shed the illusions of separation that projection creates. Carl Jung warned that as long as we are unconscious of our inner opposites, we will continue to project them onto others. The romanticized image of a soulmate, the endless chase for completion in another, the pain of repeated heartbreak, these are not signs that love has failed, but that the psyche is attempting to wake us up. Until the inner feminine and masculine are reconciled within, every relationship becomes a mirror of that inner division. Projection begins when we unconsciously cast our inner archetypes onto the people around us, expecting them to fulfill roles we have yet to accept within ourselves. A woman who has not integrated her inner masculine may seek men who embody strength, clarity, and protection, only to feel abandoned or controlled when they fail to carry her unresolved needs. A man disconnected from his inner feminine may be drawn to women who radiate emotion and depth, only to feel overwhelmed by the very qualities he has suppressed in himself. These projections create cycles of longing and disappointment, not because love is impossible, but because it is being approached from fragmentation rather than wholeness. The journey towards sacred union begins when we turn inward. As the feminine surrenders, allowing emotion to move, truth to surface, and illusions to fall away, she creates space for the masculine to rise within. He brings discernment, direction, and a steady presence. Together, these forces begin to harmonize, not through perfection but through presence. In this inner union, something profound occurs. The projections fall away. We no longer need others to carry what we've reclaimed within. We meet people not from lack, but from fullness. Love becomes less about needing and more about seeing. This shift restores outer love to its sacred roots. No longer is it a battlefield of unmet needs or unspoken expectations. It becomes a ground of authenticity, of real connection that honors both vulnerability and boundaries. In Jungian terms, the self, representing the totality of the psyche, emerges more clearly when the opposites are integrated. And from this space of internal wholeness, we relate to others from the self, not from the ego. We no longer confuse love with possession or intensity with truth. We begin to recognize that sacred union is not about merging with another to escape ourselves, but about standing whole in our own being and allowing love to flow between two integrated souls. This does not mean relationships become effortless, but they become conscious. Triggers are no longer threats, but invitations to grow. Conflict becomes a tool for evolution rather than destruction. Intimacy deepens because there is nothing left to protect, only truth to reveal. And through this shared commitment to presence, love transcends fantasy and becomes a vessel of transformation. The universe, too, responds to this inner balance. Jung spoke of synchronicity as meaningful coincidence, moments when the inner state aligns with the outer world in mysterious but undeniable ways. When the divine feminine surrenders fully and the inner masculine rises in support, the psyche enters coherence. And in this coherence, life begins to reflect what is true within. Encounters become more aligned. Relationships resonate at a deeper level. The pain of the past does not disappear, but it transforms. It becomes compost for the soul's flowering. Sacred union, then, is not reserved for fairy tales or mystics. It is a psychological reality available to anyone willing to do the inner work. It requires courage to face the shadow, humility to release projections, and devotion to the deeper path. But in return, it offers something rare and real. Love that liberates, not binds. Love that sees, not seeks to possess. Love that balances, not breaks. As the divine feminine reclaims her place, not in isolation but in integration, and the inner masculine becomes a conscious ally rather than an internal tyrant, the heart finds its true rhythm again. This is the restoration of love, not as fantasy, but as lived embodied truth. And in that space, the sacred is no longer an idea. It is the very foundation of how we love, live, and relate. When the divine feminine surrenders fully, it is not an act of defeat. It is a return to truth. It marks the beginning of inner alignment, where intuition, emotion, and depth are no longer silenced but honored. And in this surrender, a quiet revolution begins. The inner masculine awakens, not to dominate, but to hold space. Together, they form the foundation of wholeness, the sacred union that Jung called individuation, where the self emerges as the guiding center of a balanced life. Through this internal reunion, love itself is transformed. No longer distorted by projection or fear, it becomes a force of healing, clarity, and presence. Relationships evolve into sacred mirrors, revealing not only who we are, but who we are becoming. And as the inner world shifts, so too does the outer. Synchronicities align, deeper connections form, and life begins to move with meaning. This is the promise of integration, not perfection, but authenticity, not control, but coherence, not fantasy, but sacred love. If this message resonates with you, subscribe to the channel, share your reflections below, and watch the next video on your screen. It continues this journey of transformation. The world changes when the soul comes home. Begin within.